Mahmoud Khalil, a young Palestinian activist, found himself at the center of a political firestorm. He was arrested on March 8, 2025, by immigration officials. Khalil had just graduated from Columbia University with a master's degree. He was known for his passionate advocacy for Palestinian rights. Khalil was a leading voice in student protests demanding a ceasefire in Gaza. Khalil's arrest sent shockwaves through the Columbia community and beyond. He was not a stranger to controversy. His activism had made him a target. A doxing campaign had labeled him a terrorist threat. This campaign called for his deportation. Khalil reached out to Colombia's president for help the night before his arrest. The arrest took place amidst heightened tensions over the ongoing conflict in Gaza. The situation highlighted the complexities of free speech and activism, particularly for those advocating for Palestinian rights. Khalil's story became a flashpoint in the debate over the limits of dissent in the United States. Khalil's detention brought into sharp focus the challenges faced by Palestinian activists in the U.S. It raised questions about the government's use of immigration laws to silence dissent. His case became a rallying cry for those concerned about the shrinking space for free speech in the country. The Department of Homeland Security stated Khalil's arrest was based on a State Department order. They revoked his green card, citing a provision in immigration law. This provision allows deportation for individuals deemed a risk to foreign policy. A senior Homeland Security official confirmed this was the basis for Khalil's detention. Civil rights organizations condemned the arrest. They called it a blatant attack on First Amendment rights. The American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, denounced the use of immigration law to stifle dissent. They argued that Khalil's activism was protected speech. The New York Immigration Coalition echoed these concerns. They pointed to a disturbing pattern of targeting activists. Legal experts questioned the government's justification for Khalil's arrest. They argued that the foreign policy provision was being misused. They stressed that this provision was not intended to silence dissenting voices. Experts warned of a chilling effect on activism if the government continued to use this tactic. The arrest sparked outrage and protests across the country. Students, activists, and academics rallied to Khalil's defense. They demanded his immediate release and an end to the government's crackdown on Palestinian activism. The case became a lightning rod for broader anxieties about the erosion of civil liberties in the U.S. Columbia University faced criticism for its response to Khalil's arrest. While the university confirmed ICE's presence on campus, it maintained it would follow the law. Critics argued that the university had a moral obligation to protect its students, regardless of their political views. A town hall was scheduled to address student concerns, but many felt the university's response was inadequate. In contrast to the university's cautious stance, the Trump administration celebrated Khalil's arrest. President Trump called it the first of many to come. He vowed to crack down on pro-Palestinian demonstrations on college campuses, labeling them illegal protests. Trump pledged to deport foreign students and imprison agitators involved in these protests. He framed his actions as part of a broader effort to combat terrorist sympathizers. Secretary of State Marco Rubio echoed Trump's sentiments. He declared on social media that visas and green cards of individuals deemed Hamas supporters would be revoked. Rubio's statement raised concerns about the government's broad labeling of pro-Palestinian activists as terrorists. Critics argued that such rhetoric further stifled free speech and created a climate of fear. The arrest and the subsequent reactions highlighted the growing polarization around the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the U.S. Khalil's case illustrated how this polarization played out on college campuses and within the legal system. It raised serious questions about the future of free speech and activism in an increasingly divided America. Mahmoud Khalil's arrest unfolded against the backdrop of the ongoing conflict in Gaza. The situation in Gaza, particularly after the events of October 7, 2023, had sparked protests and activism across the globe. These protests often centered around calls for divestment from companies supporting Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories. Khalil's activism at Columbia University was part of this larger movement. The conflict in Gaza, with its devastating human cost, had galvanized a new generation of activists. These activists, many of them students, were using their voices and platforms to demand justice for Palestinians. They were challenging traditional narratives and demanding accountability from their governments and institutions. Khalil's arrest was seen by many as an attempt to silence this growing movement. The response to Khalil's arrest, both from the government and university administrations, highlighted the challenges faced by those advocating for Palestinian rights. It showed how quickly activism could be labeled as anti-Semitism or support for terrorism. This conflation of criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism had a chilling effect on free speech and made it difficult to have open and honest conversations about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Khalil's story served as a stark reminder of the importance of protecting dissent, even when it is unpopular or challenges the status quo. It underscored the need for vigilance in safeguarding civil liberties and ensuring that all voices, even those critical of government policy, have a space to be heard. The case served as a powerful example of how the fight for justice in Palestine was intertwined with the fight for social justice and human rights globally.